Hi, good morning.
Hi, Jürgen.
Good morning, Talib. Good morning, Marika.
Good afternoon.
Yeah,
Hi,
afternoon,
Jürgen.
I
How are
guess.
you?
It's evening for Talib.
Hi, Talib.
How are you?
Hello.
Long time no see.
Yes,
Long time.
yes, I've been thinking of you. We're doing a special cherry blossom on Saturday.
I know. I'm aware of that.
I hope you
Very
can
good.
come.
Marika, how's everything? We have a fairly small audience, but hopefully we get everyone on live stream.
Yeah,
So-
is Mona coming? Because she told me she wanted to participate.
Yeah, she sent me an email yesterday. I think she's planning to come.
Good, because she
We
wants
don't have Paul
to.
here yet, so I don't know. Is he joining us early?
I don't know. Let me call him, okay?
Okay. And then Talib, I scheduled tomorrow we have the Hawaii if you can, and then I scheduled the Africa for Thursday.
Okay. Tomorrow's the same time?
Yeah, it's the same time. Yeah,
Okay.
I think it'll be interesting because we have
I
really
will.
some enormous changes here, but I think no one else in the world did.
Definitely.
How are you doing otherwise?
Okay. Things in Jordan are not very clear now. It's a confusing situation.
Yeah, I see this. We haven't reported about it because it's more political. It's not really tourism,
Yeah.
so I kind of leave that
Yes.
out.
No, don't touch it. It's better.
Yeah, we don't want to open up a can of worms.
Yeah.
It's also good to have a small audience. I like this because, for us, many of us, we don't know. I haven't been to the museum yet because it's been closed. So Paul has been very involved in the setup, the story about the museum, because it's relatively new. I think it's a year old.
Only.
Right.
That's good. Okay, Jürgen, let me ask
Yes.
you a question before we get started. Anything new on the Mexico WTTC and WTO front?
I haven't heard anything. Also, Gloria has been very quiet, so I don't know if they're reconsidering it or because they have not promoted it much. I got a few emails to sign up, and I did sign up, but I didn't want to pay for the hotels yet because they're like almost $600 a night. I do that for the 2 nights if I know for sure it's happened, but I haven't booked anything. And Gloria hasn't responded so far on anything new. So
What about UNWTO? Are they still insisting on the Dominican Republic event?
They changed. I talked to the Dominican Republic, you remember, and they agreed to change it, and they changed the event.
Very good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did that.
Yeah.
Very good.
And I talked to the minister's office directly.
Yes.
And they were very nice. I think Zurab now stopped it because they told me they would send me an email with the new dates as soon as they have it. And I got one email from the secretary from the minister, what was very nice. And then I didn't hear it. So I'm sure Zurab is interfering.
Hi, Talib.
Hi, Mona. How are you?
How are you?
Hi, you're doing good.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, hi, everybody.
Hi, Paul.
Hello. I'm Mary Carr. How are you?
Hi, Mona.
Good to see. A lot of good friends.
Good. How's Michelle?
Michelle as well. Yeah, he's doing fine. How are you
Very
doing?
good. I'm doing well. Alhamdulillah.
You look great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Marikara, Talib and I are of Palestinian descent, and Paul, so this is very fascinating
Oh,
for us.
is that right?
Yeah.
My goodness.
That's right.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah, no, this is an exciting segment.
Great.
Isn't it true, Talib, there are more Palestinians in Jordan than there are in Palestine?
Well, it depends on how you define a Palestinian.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
That's what I heard. Someone told me that. I think a tour guide told me that when I was in Jordan or in Palestine, one of the two.
There are about 2.5 million to 3 million refugees in Jordan.
Right.
Officially.
Yeah, many of us are mixed. Yeah, as well.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so let's go. We have 2 people in the waiting room. Let's go and warm up the live stream. So I'm going to take a few minutes usually when you go live so people get notified. But we're live now on eTurboNews and on Facebook.
Good. Okay, Paul. We're waiting for you.
Okay, let's give it 2 minutes and then I can let people in. There are really not that many people today, but let's see.
Yeah,
I even got some angry letters why we would support this. So.
Oh my God.
Because it's very political or what?
People make
Because
it
it's
political.
Palestine.
You know, yeah, they make it political.
It's not fair.
Well, you got angry emails?
We have a question at least, you know.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, we're open to discuss.
I'm ready to answer any question with that.
Yeah,
I'll
and
support
dialogue.
you, Talib.
Thank you.
I've got your back.
I'm used to that. Okay.
Me too. Yeah.
Okay, so let's 45 seconds. We have 3 people holding only. So I'm trying to test the live stream, and I'm not connecting.
Well, I'll share it.
I want to know more about the cultural aspect.
Jürgen, can you let Mohammed Al Khatib into? He's the lead tour guide.
I'm going to let everyone in. So go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thanks. He's going to let you in now, Mohammed.
Okay, I'm in.
Oh, great. Good.
Hello, Mohammed. How are you?
Where is Mohammed? Okay, connecting.
He's down there.
Hello,
Mohammed.
He's getting ready, and then there's Bashara. Okay, great. Okay, even if it's not a lot of people, it doesn't matter. That's great.
Okay, so we're live. It just worked. Okay, very good. Okay, so I think it's 8 o'clock. So let me put everyone on mute for a second, and then we can get started. So we are live everywhere. So that's the good part. Okay, anyone who is actually live right now on eTurboNews or Facebook and who's seeing us and wanted to be part of a Q&A on a fascinating story we're about to hear about the Palestinian Museum in Washington, D.C., you can just simply go to worldtourismevents.com. Worldtourismevents.com is the next event up, and sign in, and you can still be part of this live audience. So without further ado, let me mute everyone and we can get started. A wonderful good morning from Hawaii and aloha, and good afternoon to Washington, D.C. Good evening to Jordan. My name is Jürgen Steinmetz, and I'm joining you from the World Tourism Network. With us today is eTurboNews, Livestream.travel, and we're coming to you with our good friend Paul Costello. Paul is a tour guide in Washington, D.C. He will introduce himself a little bit more once we get started. And of course, there's Marika. She is leading our tour guide interest group for the World Tourism Network. And a very special welcome also from Jordan, from Mona Nafa. She's been a frequent guest. She's a member of the World Tourism Network right from the beginning. And of course, our co-chair, Dr. Talib Rifai. And for those that are not online here, I know everyone online knows Talib. Talib was the Secretary General for the World Tourism Organization, the UNWTO, for 2 terms. And he's originally from Jordan. He actually, before he became the Secretary General, he was the Minister of Tourism from Jordan. And why Jordan? Jordan and Palestine, there is a big connection. Not only are they neighbors, but I just heard from Mona, she's also Palestine descent. And so are many, many people. So without further ado, let me give the microphone to Marika, who can then introduce Paul, if that's okay. Good morning, Marika.
Good morning, good afternoon, good morning, and hello everyone from around the world. Again, my name is Mary Cardonato. We always thank W2N for providing us this platform and able to communicate as tourist guides, finding our digital voice and be able to share our stories. So many of us have been broadcasting since the end of last year. So we continue to do that. And today we have our friend, Paul Costello, who lives in Washington and will tell us more about the Museum of the Palestinian People. Paul has also helped me a lot in mentoring some of my students in the tourist guide industry, and he has helped me design narratives, and now he's helping me write my own story. So I hope to have a story by the end of the year, and hopefully I can share that too. So now, Paul, it's the floor is yours. If you want to introduce your team who is with us today.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Marika. Thank you, Jürgen. Welcome, everybody. I'm becoming a bit of a familiar face here. But thank you for the welcome. It's always great. I love this platform because it's the most international platform I guess I get the privilege of being part of, and to hear different people from different parts of the world. Part of this, as Marika and I know Washington, and we know the secret treasures of Washington. And I guess the premise for this event was that we all know the Smithsonian's, and we all know the art galleries. We all know some of the main places in Washington, D.C. But for tour guides who are always looking for something different, something a little bit unusual, there are so many wonderful medium-sized and small-sized museums in Washington, D.C. that they're a treasure to discover. So like and there's more museums on the way. They're going to be building a museum for women's history. They've just, I think, passed the legislation for Native American history to be commemorated somewhere, maybe on the mall. I walk past it on the way to the metro. Normally it's like Jewish American heroes of American wars. Like it's a little museum, but it's like, wow, extraordinary. So there's a museum that I've been part of, and being part of the reason why it exists, is the Museum of the Palestinian People, that came out of the work that I've been doing for the last dozen years in Israel and Palestine. And part of the program is to have our young leaders emerging from Palestine and Israel not only just say that they're leaders, but actually to prove it by actually creating a project on the ground that somehow speaks to the change they desire for their people. So the Museum of the Palestinian People is a project for change, which is what we call it, that evolved out of some of my alums, and some of them are on the call. There's Bishara there. Bishara Nassar is from Bethlehem, and he took it upon himself to say, you know what, the Palestinian story hasn't been told in Washington, D.C., so with encouragement from me and many others to say, all right, you create a museum to tell it. And so anyway, I don't want to steal the story because it's really Bishara's story. And it's also Mohammed Al-Khatib or Mo, as we call him, is the lead docent, the lead tour instructor, who's going to take us through. He's the expert in this museum. And it's going to be great to have him lead us. So the way we're going to do this is sort of like a conversation. We can't possibly cover everything in an hour or so. We want some time for your questions and answers. And I guess I should alert Mo and Bishara, like Mona and Talib probably know more about this than any of us, as in like, so good. So Mona and Talib, feel free to jump in at any time and elaborate, because I think one of the secrets of tour guiding is to use the knowledge of the people that are on your tour. Like, this is wonderful to have people who are indigenous to this story, and will understand why it's so important that Washington get a chance to hear it. But I'm going to have a conversation with Mo back and forth, and we'll take some breaks in between, and we're going to break into the 3 sections, I guess. But part of it is the story of the museum and the exhibits that it displays. We're going to give you a little taste of that. And then Mo's own story, and I think we've got Bishara here, so I really want to push to Bishara can tell his story too. And then the big story as to why a Palestinian museum built in Washington, D.C. speaks to a bigger story that's happening in the United States right now about human rights and civil rights and so on. So let me just start off. Bishara and Mo, why don't you just briefly introduce yourself, and then I'll be like the Frost. David Frost, I'll be sort of throwing questions at you to keep it going. So, Mo, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much, Paul, for the introduction. My name is Mohammed Al-Khatib, or Mohammed Al-Khatib. Marhaba, Talib wa Muna, sharafna fikum. I'm a Palestinian refugee from Lebanon, but I moved to the US it's been like 20 years now. I moved to DC about 10 years ago, and a couple of years ago in 2019, I heard about the Museum of the Palestinian People, and I immediately wanted to get involved in any way I can. So the museum shortly opened in June. I'm going to let Bishara speak to that a little bit more. And I've been there since. So I've been with the museum for almost 2 years now. And it's been a phenomenal experience. And I'm so grateful to be here. And my day job, I actually do work for the Smithsonian. I am, but I'm the manager of web operations at the National Zoo. So if you want any information about the zoo, let me know.
So if you've ever seen the Washington Zoo, you will have heard the stories about the pandas. So Mo is the public relations person for the pandas in the Washington Zoo. So yeah, that's great. So and this is your story in what way, Mo? Why is the Museum of the Palestinian People your story? Just briefly.
So as Palestinians here in the U.S., I mean, I can speak, on behalf of Palestinians at least. It's so hard to get involved in meaningful causes sometimes. And I feel that the museum is really a golden opportunity for Palestinians to not only find meaningful contribution, into telling our side of the coin, but it's also a great platform for us to share our stories as Palestinians.
Okay. I'll come back to you around just your own little personal story there. So Bishara, you're the founder of this operation. So just briefly, why don't you introduce yourself and just tell us briefly, how did a museum like this even come into existence?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for hosting this tour this afternoon. Thank you, Paul and Mo. Yeah, just a little bit to introduce myself. I grew up in Bethlehem, and specifically, I grew up on a farm that's outside of Bethlehem that has been with my family for over 100 years. So I come from a family of farmers. So imagine, a farm boy going to Washington, D.C. What's going to happen, right? And so right now the farm is under the threat of confiscation. That means the Israeli governments want to take it and build a settlement there. And really that really spurred my awareness about what's happening to me as a child growing up in the farm, and raised my awareness on what can I do as an individual, what can I do as member of the Nassar family to make a difference in the world, not just in Palestine. So I came to the United States, came to the United States in 2011, and actually, Paul here is my mentor, and he participating in his program and his amazing activities and leadership programs. Really, for my first introduction was to get to know leadership and leadership training through Paul. And as Paul said, we went on the program and we would go to the Holocaust Museum, and many Palestinians would object, would say, why do we go to the Holocaust Museum? So Paul would say, well, because we don't have a Palestinian museum. So someone needs to do it. And Paul was like public said, someone needs to do it. And basically, this is how why this museum started, and not just because of that story, but also the main thing. One of the biggest things is that Palestinians in the U.S. are being victimized. One is that we are seen as victims, like poor Palestinians. We see them in the news as a story item, right, as a bullet point, and we don't understand as Americans. So that's one on the one hand. On the other hand, that we are also portrayed as violent people, right? That violent people, we see all this violence and images in the news. And that's why the museum is really offering a third way, which is a human way, a way that to show Palestinians as artists, as entrepreneurs, as in politicians, right, and also as Palestinian Americans.
Wonderful, Bishara. So yeah, I think it's one of the, I think it's Barbara Meyerhoff is an anthropologist. She's deceased now, but she's a very famous lady who studied Holocaust survivors who were in a retirement village, I think in California. And she had this great line. She said, the first step of liberation of a people who've been silenced is to grab back their own story. And so I think, whether it's the Jewish diaspora who struggles so hard to keep their story alive and have done a remarkable and heroic job about that. And so to in other minorities around the world, that the Palestinian diaspora have a chance to say, listen, let's get out of the conflict zone here and let's just tell our story and let's celebrate our hardships and what we've overcome and the fact that we're still here and we have a lot to share and that we're part of the American fabric. We're Palestinian Americans. We've got an American story just like the Irish have, just like the Germans have, just like the Greeks have. We too want to be part of that in the Washington, in what's offered in Washington in terms of people who come and visit us. So that's the kind of the background. Now let's move into the museum. And just to say that the museum is situated between DuPont Circle and Adams Morgan. And actually it's, when it opened, Bashara told the story that in 1968, the area in which the museum operates was devastated by the riots after Martin Luther King's assassination. And this part of Washington has been built back remarkably. And the Museum of the Palestinian People is part of that revival and that renewal. So like it's a wonderful position between DuPont Circle with all the restaurants and art galleries and Adams Morgan, which is like a whole other world. So many international restaurants in Adams Morgan. So back to you now, Mo, and just tell us, you're going to take us to the opening and give us some of the opening exhibits of the museum and show us. Now, can you share the screen? Have you got a share screen button at the bottom down below?
Yep.
Do. Okay. So let's start then. Put us into the picture, give us some context, Mo, as we come into your museum.
Sure. So just before that, we do have our virtual tour. It was the painstaking effort of several volunteers, and they did such an amazing job. Particularly in the pandemic, we wanted people to stay in touch with the museum. So the entire museum itself is available online. Just let me know if you run into any issues with like any screen tearing or whatever. But yeah, this is the outside of the museum, and then you can go in. And so the museum itself is divided into 3 sections. The first section centers around the history of Palestine and the Palestinians up until a certain event that really binds all Palestinians together. This is the Nakba. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this word, but in Arabic, it literally means catastrophe. And it is the word Palestinians use to define the events of 1948, namely the displacement and depopulation of over 400 Palestinian Arab towns and villages, and the expulsion and displacement of over 700,000 Palestinians from the ancestral homes and villages. I am a product of the Nakba because my family was exiled in 1948. So the second part of the museum focuses more on the culture and the contemporary issues facing Palestinians. We explore themes of resilience. We also explore some of the symbology around the Palestinian resistance movement itself, because it is such a huge part of our culture and our history, our collective narrative, if you will. And then the last part of the museum, which is equally important, is our art exhibit. And this is the only non-permanent part of our collection. It is where we have several different art exhibits. The current exhibit we have right now is called Intersections. And I might talk about that a little bit, but it's basically a collaboration between Palestinian and Black artists on the topics of police brutality and systemic racism. And it is a phenomenal exhibit that we're going to have on through May. So
great. So that's wonderful. So there's 3 sections in the museum. It's kind of like past, present, and the future. It's kind of you've got some exhibits. So some of our artists, some other artists who are on our program were commissioned to do special painting to imagine Palestine of the future. So, but like, let's put us on the map for starters. I think you said that you were going to show us. There's an article in National Geographic. There's the map, and then there's some samples of some of the great artwork and ceramics and pottery. So why don't you put us on the map? Where are we?
So right now we are, as we enter the museum, and to our left, I mean, we really wanted to capture the whole spectrum of history. So the Palestinian heritage, if you will, is it's ancient, but it's also very contemporary. And so we wanted to bridge those two together. And the first thing we wanted to look at is this map. And sorry, it is a little grainy, but I can link to a more high-res version of this.
That's okay.
This was a this was a map that was published in 1938 by the National Geographic, titled Bible Lands. And of course, the first thing you see, I mean, the most prominent thing is that it does say Palestine on it, and this map is actually was marketed primarily to Americans who were very interested. I mean, at the turn of the 20th century, you see the surging interest in the history of the Near East, particularly also around Palestine. And so maps like this were not uncommon. The items in red actually correspond to important events in the Bible and your average Western Civilization 101 class. And for Palestinians, seeing a map that says Palestine on it is very impactful, particularly because maps themselves have become part of the ideological war in this conflict.
Right. So just to sort of show a map with Palestine on it, I believe you've also got some passports from the British Mandate era that show Palestine. So people had a Palestinian passport. So I guess part of sometimes the contention or the argument is that Palestine doesn't exist. Well, that may be into the political controversy, but at least there it is on a map published by something like the National Geographic. So, okay, so you're on the map now. So what was life like there before, back in the day, 100 years ago? Where were we? If we went and visited, what would we see or experience?
So my family, I mean, okay, I could talk a little bit about my family experience. So we're originally from the north of Palestine, from a small village called Deir el-Asi, which was mostly a farming community. It started off as a monastery, Christian monastery. Mm-hmm. And then after the Crusades, it changed over. A lot of the former soldiers, battalions of the Crusades went and settled in the north of Palestine, and Deir el-Asi was one of the communities they established. And Cassi actually is the name of the fort, which is a European name. So for the longest time, I thought it meant Deir el-Asi. Asi means hard or like rock-like, but no, it's like Cassie, which I think could be short for Cassandra.
So your family's been there, what, since Crusader times, are you saying?
So, I mean, the lineage of my family goes back generations. It's hard to pinpoint. Right. They grew up in a subsistence farmers as fallahin, so similar to Bashara's family. The Palestinian cultural experience is grounded in appreciation and love for the land. This is a big part of the Palestinian narrative, if you will.
So move us to that National Geographic article that you had from 1914, did you say? So it showed us some of those things you're talking about, the land.
Yeah, so we wanted. Wow. Yeah, so this is we actually have the original publication from 1914. This was an article called "Village Life in the Holy Land," and it's basically a. Oops, sorry about that. That was the wrong tab. Here we go. And we do have the entire PDF online, but this article was written by John Whiting, and he sought to capture Fallahi life or peasant life in Palestine. And his argument in this article, which could be seen as a little problematic today, was that the time essentially stood still. That a lot of the practices and norms that the Palestinians engaged in their farming practices kind of mirrored what was mentioned and referenced in the Bible. Including the way they lived, the structures they built. So, I can just give you a quick overview. Here we have some images. The way they dressed, really stood the test of time. They just, it was, to him, they were unmoved,
Right. Wow. And then you've got as you walk into the museum, there's this beautiful pieces of ceramic or vases. So there are samples of some of this life that, around the time of the article. Can you show us some of those? They're always intriguing and beautiful.
Sure, yes. So these were actually, we have a collection of glassware. These are from Al Khalil or Hebron, which is a city in the West Bank in Palestine. And they might look a little mundane, but I mean, the glass like so many other crafts, are a big part of Palestinian the Palestinian folkloric or artisanal scene. Hebron glass, particularly, glass making is practiced by many families in Hebron, and some of these
Very
traditions.
famous.
They claim date back thousands of years, like since Ayyam al-Rum, or the time of the Romans. And many of the techniques they use kind of still are, that were in use back then, are still in use today. Some of them include, the collection of oxidizing agents from nearby villages to create this unique green color, and also all of it's obviously handmade.
Beautiful.
Our family, we had these pieces in our growing up, and they were, a no-go zone for kids, so we could not get anywhere near these.
Is it true that you were playing with your sister and you knocked over the precious Hebron vase that your mother had?
It was my cousin.
And you got into big trouble?
Yeah, it was my cousin, but yeah, it was.
It wasn't you, was it? You didn't.
No.
Me. Wasn't me.
No,
me. So I wonder now, because again, I wonder if Talib and Mona or Bishara want to add to that before we transition to this is the time before 1948 in a way. We're celebrating, the story doesn't just begin in 1948. It goes a long way back. So Mona or Talib or anybody else, any questions or comments, or Bishara, you want to add to that? I'm sure some of this is your own story.
Yeah. Paul, I have a question. This is Mary Carr.
Sure.
Could you, or Bashara, the map, can you help me? I am not very good in locating where Palestine is. Could you give me some boundaries, where it begins, where it ends? If you can go back to the map.
It's very simple.
Yeah.
It's where you find now the name Israel.
Yeah.
Exactly. Including the West Bank.
Mm-hmm.
So can you see Palestine there, America? And you see the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee.
Okay,
from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean.
Can you just circle it with the pointer, please, Mo?
Sure.
Do you want to show the diaspora map, the other map?
Sure, yeah.
That's on the link. Maybe that's more clear.
Yeah, I do. I was gonna also pull up a. So I'm just
but that's not that. Does that show Palestine?
It doesn't show Palestine. What it does show is this. So this blue marker. Yeah.
See America. See where the marker is. Palestine. So as Talib says, when you look on a modern map, it's got Israel on it. But back before 1948, it had Palestine on it. Even the ancient Roman map had Palestina.
Exactly, from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean west.
Yeah.
And from the northern Galilee to the Red Sea down south.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So thank you, Marika. Any other questions or comments or contributions from anybody listening? Mona or Talib or Bishara, you want to add anything before we move to 1948?
I'd like to. During the break, I put on my Palestinian hatta. I'm a first-generation Arab. My mother's Palestinian from Nablus, and my father's Jordanian. But growing up in California, my parents were immigrants, assimilating into the American lifestyle in Southern California. My father was a historian, and he always instilled education on the Palestinian people, though my father, once again, was born and raised in Jordan. I am so excited knowing about this Palestine Museum, and I'm sorry I haven't visited it yet, but the importance of documenting through a museum, through conversations like this, is essential for a culture who is always being challenged. So documenting our culture, our heritage, our language, our food, our nation is the best investment I see in a long, long time. My mother has a passport that says Nablus, Palestine. She was born in Nablus, Palestine. Mom saved the coins. Our Palestinian coins are round, and they've got Arabic, Hebrew, and English on it. Wow. So prior to 1948, all religions, Muslim, Christian, Judaism, lived as one. And like you, Mohammed, my mother was a 1948 refugee, kicked out of her home, if I may. And we all have this in us to retain our culture.
Wonderful, Mona. That's beautiful to have you on this and to realize that you've got that same story. Talib, anything you want to say in addition before we move forward?
Of course. I'm Palestinian in origin, but I'm Jordanian because my father was born in Safad, northern Palestine, near the village where Muhammad is in. It's a town called Safad. But he moved to Jordan before 1948 with my family.
Okay.
So they came to Jordan as Jordanians. We consider Jordanians now in Jordan, like many Palestinians are. But the fact is that our Palestinian roots will never disappear because it is, as Mona said, it's a culture that cannot go away. You cannot erase any culture by any means. Yeah. And today, it's an issue of rights, not an issue of nationalism. It doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it Palestine, you can call it Israel, you can call it what you want to call it. People have rights. Mm-hmm. And the Palestinians' rights were not seen. This museum is a very important step in showing that people have rights. Thank you.
Thanks, Talib. I got the chance to visit Jordan a few years ago, and it was so amazing. It was just like I was experiencing Palestine without the checkpoints. It was just amazing. It really was.
Yes,
amazing.
because there's a big number of Palestinians in Jordan.
So as we transition then to there's life before 1948, and then we have to, this is a defining moment experience that continues to this day. So take us now to the next part of the museum, 1948, and as you say, the Nakba and the diaspora, like many peoples, like the Irish, like the Jewish, like so many people, it becomes a moment in time that actually shapes the destiny of the Palestinian story. So tell us about that, please, and show us what you've got to show in the museum, Mo.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to preface, a big part of our culture is is this confrontation that we face, and the Nakba itself, which was it's a collective historical event that binds us together, and we really wanted to show that. So we have a display of documents here from the time of the British Mandate. So as you know, Palestine from World War I, from the conclusion of World War I up until 1948 was under the British Mandate. So we have a collection of documents from the British Mandate. And these were all donated to us by one family. They're the Sa family, they're from Ramallah. And
Which family, Muhammad? Which family?
Sa family. Al-Tarazi Sa.
Yeah.
It's Sa.
Sa, yeah. They're a Christian family, Eastern Orthodox family from Ramallah. But, they stayed in Ramallah throughout from, the time of the Ottomans to the British Mandate, and then after 1948, and then the Naksa, which happened in 1967. So they had this tremendous transformation, this tremendous, this upheaval without leaving their homes. Their identity shifted so much, and it's all captured in these really mundane pieces of paper. And I'll just give you a really quick overview in the interest of time. These are the passports they would have carried under the British Mandate. And of course, you see the Union seal, and it says the British passport, and it says Palestine. Here are the identity cards of Su'ad Tarazi. So this is the grandparents. Here's Su'ad Tarazi and An-Nasa. And then we also have their marriage certificate here. This is actually one of my favorite parts of piece of the collection. So this couple, they were married in Jerusalem in 1934, but this document was not printed till 1964. And I wrestled a lot with why this gap existed. And it's because between them was 1948. And when 1948 happened, they effectively stopped being Palestinians on paper. And this is something that happens to so many Palestinians around the world. In their bid to retain their culture, they hang on to anything that proves who they were, their identity. And even I was born an UNRWA refugee from Ain al-Hilwi, which is a refugee camp And I still carry my birth certificate with me. I still carry my UNRWA documentation, even though I'm an American citizen now. I have been for over 10 years now. These are things that still matter to me. You know,
Wow.
you know.
Wonderful. Okay. And what else are the highlights of what you're showing us there?
Sure. So we have a couple of stamps as well, because stamps are a big artifact, a part of the you know, a nation's story, if you will. This is one of my favorite stamps here. This is a stamp that was published or printed in 1938. We blew it up, and it's a confluence of so many things, political aspirations that were going on at the time. So in the 1938, which is the you see an interreligious symbology, you know, this effort to bring Muslim and Christian Palestinians together. This is the Holy Church of the Sepulchre and the Dome of the Rock. And they overlay a map of Palestine, Arab Palestine, with prominent names and villages. And of course, it says Palestine for the Arabs, or Falastin al-Arab. So they were definitely trying to make a statement. They were in the late 1930s, and even, you know, there were several competing political ideologies in British Mandate Palestine. And there was Palestinian nationalism, there was Pan-Arabism, there was Zionism, there was collectivism. And this is the Palestinian Arab nationalism here.
Wow,
you
right.
know.
Wonderful.
So, and a stamp like this was an indication of the conflict that was to become, which would lead up to the Nakba. So
great.
And we have a whole wall here that kind of, sorry, go ahead.
And so then the other thing is that did you have some artifact there that every family almost all the Palestinians that I know, they bring one thing with them that's kind of like the biggest, the strongest symbol of their connection to their origins. And what's that?
Oh, there are a few. I mean, so
like
when the Nakba, you know,
the key, have you got the key?
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that right now. So we do have in the museum, we don't have it on the tour right now. We don't have it listed, but we do have, what I could show you is a panel of Palestinians holding up keys. The key has become a very important symbol for Palestinian refugees, especially, or Palestinians in the diaspora. Many Palestinians, when they were being forced out of their homes or fleeing violence, they took their keys and their deeds with them in the hopes that they would be able to return, you know, pending some international agreement or settlement. Of course, that didn't happen. And so the only thing that remained, essentially, that was kind of a vestige or a memory of their house was a key. And it's an enduring symbol of the Palestinian desire to return.
Wow.
So,
wonderful. Yeah. So I guess, you know, you're just showing us little samples of this museum, sure. And people should understand that we always said it's a small museum with a big story. And so part of people, when they come to the museum, it's not just that they're going to be there looking at the artifacts, but it's meant to be a place of hospitality, isn't it? So if I was there looking at some of these exhibits, what would I experience as well as just reading them on the wall? No?
Well, we actually strive to provide private tours to every single person that visits the museum. And I am, you know, so we are typically open 3 days a week, but right now with the pandemic, we've kind of limited it to Saturdays. Every person who books a ticket, you know, they get a tour of the entire space, courtesy of me and my team of docents.
So in a way, people come into the space and experience a Palestinian hospitality as almost like you're not going to see a picture of it on the wall. You're actually going to feel it as the welcome that you get.
Yeah.
You even service? Do you service tea if we come? Do you service tea and bickies?
No bickies, but we do service tea. We have traditional Palestinian tea with meramir or sage. So it's black tea with sage. It's really strong. I'm not a tea drinker. I prefer to give it to my guests and just leave me out of it. We also sometimes, some of our volunteers, I mean, we are a very grassroots effort right now. We've had volunteers bring in snacks like menaish. So menaish are like little thyme or cheese pies, and they're really delicious. And we've also brought some other Palestinian desserts as well, like knafe. And
I'm going to ask a hard question here. Maybe I'll throw it to Bashara,
sure,
Mona, and Talib, who have a background. when you come to tell the Nakba story, I mean, what you could tell that in so many different ways. So it's a very difficult and maybe for lots of people controversial. So Bashara, what goes into your head when you say like, all right, we're going to put this out there, but we don't want to start, we're not wanting to contribute to more conflict, but how do you deal with the Nakba as a piece in the museum? And for those who don't know, the Nakba is, 1948, it's 300,000 Arab villages in that region are dispossessed. They leave, and the state of Israel is born. So how do you treat the Nakba as a piece in a museum?
I like to think about it, of course, the Nakba is very painful experience to any Palestinian, and it's part of our life, and it's the other thing, it's continuous. I mean, the Palestinian displacement, you have my family, for example, is still struggling today under the Israeli occupation to be displaced, right? So there is always, it's a continued thing to be Palestinians, to be under displacement. But I like to look at it is that what are the lessons, or what did we do as Palestinians as a result of the Nakba? And that's the essence of the museum, is that we also, the Nakba story is powerful to every Palestinian, but for the museum, we would like to show the resilience that came out of the Nakba, right? The people many Palestinians who came to the US, for example, and created a lot of businesses and went into politics and became entrepreneurs as a result of their displacement in 1948, or the Palestinians who went to Lebanon or to Syria, or they stayed there, and being a Palestinian in Palestine is you will have to deal with yourself and to be creative, to survive and to thrive in this difficult situation under the occupation. Yeah.
Beautiful. Which sets the stage for, I'm thinking another great museum in Washington is the Native American Museum. And I often use it as a teaching example to say that if the Native Americans wanted to build a museum to the Trail of Tears and all the sorry story of how the dispossession of the Native Americans has happened, they could do that without any question. And they have a right to do that. And the whole museum could memorialize that pain and that suffering and that dispossession. But when, I guess for lots of reasons, but they built a museum which said, yes, our Trail of Tears is part of our story, but it doesn't start there, and it certainly doesn't end there. And so I think the Museum of the Palestinian People, originally, I think the idea was maybe it was going to be about the Nakba as the one story that it was told. But I think, Bashara and his advisor says, hang on a second, that doesn't define us. It certainly shapes us, but it does not define us. And we're going to tell the story of what we were as a people before 1948, and we did exist. It wasn't a land without a people. It certainly had a people, and it had a culture, and it had pride. And then 1948, you can't avoid it. But then the third part of the museum takes us into the future and like post-traumatic stress growth, not stress disorder. So tell us about that part of the museum now as we come to the third and final part of our tour today, Mo.
So yeah, as Bashara mentioned, resilience is a big part of our story. The Nakba is a teachable moment. It's something that propels us to act and to move forward as a people and to survive and adapt. I mean, certainly growing up in Lebanon, it was not easy. I'm not gonna lie. And the fact that I'm here in the US is, it's no short of a miracle. I'm not gonna lie, So we really wanted to highlight, so we have stories of resilience. They're part of our video feed, so I'm not gonna show them, but we have a story about a village that's been demolished over 100 times only to rebuild itself back up. We, of course, have the story of the Tent of Nations of Bashara's farm, which is beyond inspiring. I mean, it's hard to keep a dry eye. I'm an easy crier, ask Paul, when you watch it. And then we also have a story of people who survived the Intifada. So for those who don't know, Intifada, there are several Intifada. There were 3 Intifadas, technically. But the Intifada of the 1980s, which saw thousands of Palestinians take to the streets to protest the occupation, to protest the mistreatment that they felt under Israeli occupation after 1967. And so we have a really inspiring story of somebody who was involved in that and who went on to who was involved in throwing stones as a child, who went on to become a music teacher, and now his work is phenomenal. He does a lot of great work at camp in camps. We also feature a lot of Palestinian artists as well, who themselves are refugees or have gone through difficult times. We have Ahmed Hamidat. You know, I mean, his story alone, I mean, his art is beautiful, but his story is very inspiring as well. So
great.
So we wanted to kind of show those things.
So and it's an interactive museum, isn't it, Mo? So you've got videos, you can listen to the testimonies. It's oral, it's visual, as well as just pictures on a wall. So what about and then stories of resilience, and then the stories of the diaspora? You have we saw that chart earlier on. What's that story?
So the Palestinian diaspora is a big part of our culture as a people, because we are Minshirdin, we are all over the place, and we really wanted to capture that. You know, we built this. We created this map in-house to kind of answer that question: where are Palestinians today? You know, we have over 5 million Palestinians in the diaspora, all over the world, and in fact, the surprising thing is that Chile has the second largest diaspora population after Jordan. And I didn't know this, of course, until I joined the museum. I learned so many things about being Palestinian by volunteering. And so, you know, it's an example of how a community has maintained or kept onto its roots despite the odds against it. You know, of course, we have Palestinian communities here in the United States and in Canada and North America. But this is an interactive map. And Europe, yes, Akid. You know, so we do have, you know, this interactive map. So if you really wanted to get in and learn more about these different communities, please check it out on our website. And of course, I'll be happy to tell you more about it if you do come in. So. And
where in the USA are the hubs of Palestinian life? Can you focus on the USA?
Sure. Yeah, Detroit, Chicago, and New Jersey. There is a pretty sizable population of Palestinians. Of course, I did not. You know, I when I first moved, I moved to Massachusetts. They're not many Palestinians there. Right. But the DMV area, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, there's also a sizable population here as well.
Mo, can you show the Palestinian Americans on making their mark, like the Palestinian American figures?
Excellent. Thank you for reminding me. We do have a display of a prominent Palestinian Americans and Palestinians too. You know, we really wanted to emphasize that Palestinians are involved in the fabric of American life. We do contribute. You know, we have 2 members of Congress, members of Congress. We have Rashida Tlaib. We have Justin Amash. DJ Khaled is Palestinian. Prominent intellectuals like Edward Said, and prominent artists like Samia Halabi. You know, we wanted to kind of capture and feature these stories as well, because they are an inspiration for us Palestinians, us lay Palestinians, if you will. So
Gigi Hadid.
Yeah, the Hadid sisters are also Palestinian as well, and they've been very. Mo Amir he's a Palestinian comedian. Yeah, but that's probably the biggest surprise is when people come to the museum. They're like, really? The Hadid sisters are Palestinian? I'm like, yes, they are. Their father is Muhammad Anwar and Hadid, I think. And, you know, he moved from Jordan, and he's a very famous, prominent architect.
So, so I want to, I wanted, when we talked before, I wanted you to give us some recipes, because I think Palestinian food is such a vital part of the tradition. I know I live with some Palestinian folks here, are like family, and like they can't get enough of real Palestinian food. But just for change a second, tell me some, maybe Bashara can add to this. When people come to the museum, then, like, it's been going for 2 years almost now. What are some stories that people have come to the museum? What is the impact it's had on visitors?
And could you give us some statistics about that also? How many people have
stories? You know, how many people and
So, I mean, in terms of statistic, we have had, I think, over 6,000 visitors since we've opened. But online, our reach has been much farther, of course, especially since the pandemic. Our virtual programming is really robust, and you're welcome to check out our YouTube channel and our Facebook feed for previous events, including interviews with prominent Palestinian chefs. We recently had, we have an event with Reem Assis, and she is a Palestinian cook. And we also had Layla Haddad, who was featured with Anthony Bourdain on his show, Allah yarhamu. So yeah, so we you know, if you really want to get more interested in Palestinian cuisine.
So you had a story, Mo, you had a story about, because sometimes, you know, Washington's a very political city. And so like putting up a Palestine museum is a brave act in the setting of, you know, Middle East politics that plays out in Washington. You had some story that you remind me of. Was it an Israeli soldier or Israeli person who came to the museum and how that played out?
So of course, you know, when I first selected to volunteer, I did, you know, the issue of security. I remember I was the volunteer orientation, and I was like, well, you know, is this a safe space for us, given the, you know, the controversial nature, the Palestinians, you know, things that Palestinians have to face on a daily basis. And we do get a lot of Jewish visitors. We get a lot of Israeli visitors, and we welcome them with open arms, of course. But we did have, we had somebody come in one day, and you know, he did not, you know, and I asked him, you know, welcome to the museum. What brings you here? He's like, well, I'm a Krav Maga instructor. Krav Maga is an Israeli martial art technique. And he's like, I wanted to learn more about my enemy. And I told him, I'm like, I really hope you don't see the space as your enemy. We want to understand you more, and we want you to understand us. And so one of our docents, it wasn't me, she walked him throughout the museum for an hour, and he, you know, and I asked him afterwards, I'm like, how was it? And he, you know, what were your thoughts? And he responded, he's like, I had no idea. I just had no idea of how beautiful and complex and intertwined your culture is, you know, and it was very inspiring to see that, you know, somebody felt that way.
Wow.
And,
yeah, that's great. Bishar, I don't know whether you have any stories of
yeah.
I remember in the opening week, I was there helping out, and this young professional woman came in, you know, like I didn't know who she was or where she, I mean, she must have been coming to a conference, and she was from Chicago. Well, she was in tears. She just said, like, I never knew a place like this existed. And she said, you have no idea, to see my own story here is just, it's just too much. She said, I never would have believed it, but somebody is telling my story, and you have no idea how important that is. So I just
there are so many stories like that where we get, for example, we had a woman from Gaza who actually, you know, Gaza is under siege, so people cannot live in Gaza. And she was so proud that she was Zooming or Skyping her family in Gaza and showing them the museum and saying how proud she is to have a space in DC to show their story. And to show their story, you know, whether they're from the West Bank or Gaza. So there are so many stories, like, you know, I can, you know, there are others, like, you know, being, I'm usually touched by the stories of the Palestinian families who, like, you know, bring their kids or bring their children to the museum, and their kids, they never been to Palestine, or they're not allowed to go to Palestine because of all what's happening. And it's really, you know, like it's to see that it's really touching to see, like, the kids are learning basically the the parents are giving a tour with our docents to tell them, hey, this is what's happening, and they would interrupt the docents, and they're so excited to show them part of this heritage, you know, and part of what we can show at the museum.
Wonderful.
And just to one more thing for numbers, we usually get, before the pandemic, we reached out to point to get a maximum of 100 people a week. So we used to get between 50 to 100 people a week. Including like visitors to Washington, D.C., but also we got a lot of school groups, university groups, and, you know, groups from different communities, whether it's companies or nonprofits or churches who are interested to know about Palestine. Yeah.
Excellent.
So I wonder, just before we move on I want to talk a little bit about the food and the dance. Any questions or comments or contributions? Anybody?
Yeah. I would like to, hi, my name is Giso, I'm in Honolulu. I was born in Iran, so I am very familiar with all the happening around in the Middle East region, and of course with Palestine. And I moved to Germany, so it's another in-depth view of the history of this part of region that really was a shift for the world history. I think what I would like to do is to thank you first for initiating this museum and what you were sharing with parents coming in. My children were born in Germany, yeah. So I always try to keep them in a loop with the Persian culture, and now they are here in the US. So I think with the step that you took with setting up this museum and people from the same culture coming in is the validation of the stories that we tell our children, so that they know that is fact, that is real, and there is a history behind it, and to connect a lot better, and really bringing them to a realization that is not just what my dad is telling me or my mom is telling me. That's history that happens, and it has a future as well. So I think that is really, I can only congratulate you. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Gizo. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Michael or Yoni or David? Yoni, would you like, from Jerusalem? Welcome, Yoni. Just unmute yourself, Yoni. Can you unmute yourself? There you are.
Thank you for the opportunity from the World Federation of Tour Guide Association. It's great to see you again, Paul. I've been in a few of the presentations that you were involved in. My name is Yoni Shapira, and I am the chairman of Israel's Incoming Tour Guide Association. And I'm glad to be here and hear the narrative and hear the story that you have, and see this museum, which next time I'll be visiting my daughter in DC, I'll definitely come in and visit you, and we could sit and discuss over the tea some of the issues that I contend with when I guide here. Because one of the things I do, and I did this coming year, is work with our counterparts in Bethlehem and in East Jerusalem, creating dual narrative tours, and including on 21st of February, International Tour Guide Day, we had a group of Christians, Jews, Muslims touring common holy sites on Mount Zion. And each one is giving the narrative, sitting there and discussing the different points of view of the narrative. Obviously, I'm a ninth generation Jerusalemite, so my mother also had a Palestinian passport, my grandfather and so on, and I have them at home. And many of the items that you show on the wall, I have in my personal collections of items, which is quite amazing.
Actually, the one thing I do say to visitors is that, you know, there were Palestinian Arabs and Palestinian Jews, you know, yes, and they all had the same identity card. I always say this. This is a big thing people don't know, you know.
My mother was a Palestinian Jew, and there are still today a lot of Jews, including one of our tour guides, that speaks very good Arabic, and he basically said, I am a Palestinian Jew, even today. I do not expect you really to show any of the other side or the narrative that we have, which is a total different narrative as Israelis. Right. But one of the major populations of Palestinians that I think should have a recognition in the museum, and it's really up to you, is what we call Israeli Arabs, but they identify themselves as Israeli Palestinian citizens. And as you know, we just had the elections for the Parliament of Israel. It so happened in the previous elections, the Arab Party, the Palestinian Party, was the third largest in the Israeli parliament, with over 15 or 16 members of the Knesset. Unfortunately, for the last elections, because of political power play within them, they split, so only 7 got in now, this time. And today they were sworn in to the parliament. They have a major role. That 22% of our population, they're integrated. There are issues, there's no doubt, issues that they claim that they need more just recognition by the government, but they are in a prominent position in Israel, in the parliament, in the academia, in the science, in the technology, in the surrounding fabric of our communities. And I think that is an important part of the Palestinian ethos that should show that here are Palestinians that did stay in Palestine, did live and are now following the Nakba under Israeli citizenship. They did get citizenship and full rights. And as such, they have prospered very much like you have in the diaspora and in other places. I think they also deserve that piece of Palestinian heritage.
Wonderful.
I completely agree. I completely agree, Paul.
Just make sure you do, when you come to Washington, you let us know. So we'll give you absolutely. I love what you do in Jerusalem. So yeah, Talib, you're going to say something?
Yes, I want to just congratulate Yanni on his comment. I think the Palestinian Israelis are a very important component of the Palestinian community because they're proven to be very resilient as well. And the fact is that this is the future of most of the Palestinians who are residing now in the West Bank and Gaza. Because I believe completely that there was a history and there was a culture before Israel was born. That's something that Israelis, not Israelis, the Zionists, try to deny sometimes, but it's a fact that remains. And this museum is a great idea. It shows the past, the history, where there was culture and there were people, and there was a society before Israel was born. And now there is another one after Israel was born. Now we should have nothing against the Jews at all. Jews are part of the Palestinian component. They're part of the national component. But this is not a national issue anymore. It's a rights issue. Do we have rights as human beings to see who we are or not? You mentioned the fact of Native Americans, for example. Are we like the Native Americans? I don't think so. I think the Native Americans have lost most of their identity now in the American society. I was listening to Jennifer Lopez when the inauguration of Joe Biden was on. She was singing the song, "This land is my land, this land, your land from California to the New York Island." And I was thinking, if I was a Native American, how would I feel about that? Now, why is that different from Palestinian? Palestinian is like a South African, in my view, because the Palestinians today are forming a majority of the population. The Zionist scheme will not prevail, that's for sure, because the Zionist scheme can only prevail. They get the land without the people. People are not leaving. And the future generations of Palestinians are even more. None of us was born in 1948, was born in 1949, when everybody before that was dead now. But the younger generation of Palestinians are even more patriotic, more connected to their roots than their fathers and their grandfathers. Look at somebody like Adit Tamimi, for example, the young lady that stood in front of the soldier, Israeli soldier, and resisted him. That's a fact. So my vision of the future is very important. The future is in the Palestinian Israelis. We need to enlarge their population. We need to give them their rights. You cannot live under an apartheid system anymore.
Right.
And this is apartheid now.
Thank you, Talib.
Thank you.
May I just say before I continue,
Buddy,
two things. One, I would like to, first of all, I said it when I was muted, when I just got on, before I unmuted. I wanted to wish you all a Ramadan Kareem to those Muslims, and
Thank you.
Happy
Shabbat
Easter
Shalom.
to those of you
Shalom
Christians. And
Shabbat
I
Shalom
live
to
in
you.
Jerusalem, and right here in front of my home, there is a little park. It's called the Park of Peace. And yesterday afternoon, there was a group of 30 young women, all with Red Crescent vests from the Palestinian Red Crescent, like the Red Cross. And we have the Magen David, Red Magen David, Star of David. They're all the help and medical assistance and so on. So they were doing an outdoor training with a lot of games, a lot of places with a big Palestinian flag. It was a pleasure to see them. Well, on the swings, right next to them, there was a Jewish ultra-Orthodox family.
Yeah, that's great.
I know
This is
that.
the kind of thing that we would like to talk about.
Definitely. We have to talk about the future now.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering and looking at a time. So we're almost at we're just over 3 o'clock now here, our time. So we've probably got another 20 minutes just to have any more conversation and wrap it up. Anybody else who hasn't said anything or asked a question who would like to contribute anything or say anything? We've got David here, Marika. We've got Safitri. Or if Jürgen, you want to say anything, or Michael, anybody else want to contribute or ask a question? Feel free.
Well, it's been a really interesting session, and thank you for bringing this to the World Tourism Network. And it kind of reminds me, specifically here in the United States, it's really those involved in the Palestinian Museum are living what we call the American dream. The American dream is not only about money, it's about bringing cultures together. When you become an American, when you move to this country like I did from Germany, you don't leave your German heritage behind. You're still German, you're still Palestinian, you're still South African, you're still Jordanian. And this is, I think, a wonderful contribution our country is giving to the world in trying to bring so many nationalities and people together. It's not always a perfect solution. Not everyone gets along with everybody, but there is the attempt. And I think you having the Palestinian Museum is a very important attempt because it's such a controversial part of the world where Palestine, where the Palestinian people are living and struggling. And to bring this home and make it also part of the American dream is very important. And thank you for that.
Thank you, Jürgen, for the invitation.
To thank Shara and Paul for that. And
so anybody else would like to say anything? David or Marika or Michael?
Hi.
Yes. Susan.
Hi, I'm Sue. And I just wanted to mention this is a big deal in the Washington market. I have traveled with hundreds of tour operators around the world. Many people don't realize that there are these dual narratives and conflict resolution tours. And the first one I ever went on was with Mejdi tours to Israel and Palestine. And what I loved the most was we had this amazing Israeli and amazing Palestinian together with us all the time. They were so friendly. They were funny. They would finish each other's sentences. They made all the rest of us, there were 41 of us, I believe. All of us came on the tour with our own preconceived notions, but we knew very little. I mean, I knew nothing about either. I knew nothing. And when we all left, we were able to draw our own conclusions, our own love of both regions. And we had speakers, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. We might have a young woman who was a colonel in the army, the Israeli army, and she would explain to us why she did what she did. And then for lunch, we had a Palestinian rabbi. It was quite interesting. It was very interesting. Every day, all day, we learned so much that we had no idea. And coming from a little, Christian background here in America, you go to an area and you think you know what you're going to see. And they would show us as a busload would come up and they'd say, watch what they say to this busload of Christians, and it was so wrong. It was information that was disproven 20 years before, but they would never hurt their feelings or make them feel bad. They would just tell us this isn't accurate. Then they bring us to another site and tell us the latest, most relevant data, science-driven information. At the end of this trip, every one of us, we had these dinners together. Every one of us had the same impression. It's sad that these two fabulous populations that live right on top of each other can't get along, because they can get along. And it was the best thing they could have ever done to help people understand, not having one opinion or another.
Great.
We're cousins.
The Majdi Tour people are friends of ours, and actually some of our alums of our programs that Bashara was on are a participate in that and help lead it. So it's a wonderful, Siad and those people who run Majdi Tours, it's great. That's a wonderful story. Anybody else would like to share? And David or Marakar or anybody else?
Yeah, Paul. Okay, I think it's very interesting. And Mr. Shapira from Jerusalem, we are very interested. You know, we belong to the World Federation, and I'm very interested to connect with you more closely. We have a lot of guides in Jerusalem and Israel, and so we want to be sure that you are active with us, and hearing your voice today really has brought me to want to know more about your association and your relationship with the Federation, and that we continue our partnership. So I think this has brought us closer together with this story about the Palestinian Museum in Washington. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, anybody else?
We need more Obianis with us.
David or
more Obianis with us.
Do you want to say anything before we move into the final phase of this?
I just have one quick question. Is there any meeting space at the museum where people can, like after hours, have small events?
It's a very good idea.
Yeah, there is a space that we partner with, which is just the bookstore. There is a Middle Eastern bookstore just down, kind of just the next door, and we sometimes host events there.
Yeah.
So we could potentially have an event and then go through the museum privately at night?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can let us know what you're thinking, and we can work that out.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's great. I mean,
If
I think
something.
Bashara and his team are ready to accommodate anybody's needs that are reasonable. I mean, we're happy to have anyone come through the place. So anybody else? Mona, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Real quick, I just wanted to touch base. We're doing this dynamic conversation on a travel platform. Just to reiterate the importance of travel, bringing cultures and people together. Yeah. And we have lost this. Talib, these have been your words. We have lost travel and the bridging of cultures and nationalities together. And we are not going to see this again in 2021. So open dialogue. Susan, you brought a great story, having the two guides coming together and sharing the narrative from their own perspective. So travel has been hit the hardest during the pandemic, and travel will be the last to come back. So, I salute the museum for educating many Americans on the Palestinian people by having it in Washington, but not lose sight, once again, on the importance of traveling, opening up, engaging, learning, and you coming back with your story that you learned on your trip versus hearing the
come to the Holy Land. Come visit us.
Yeah, thank you, Mona. I think, one of the things I want to build on what Talib says around the issue in the Middle East around being about rights and human rights. And in all my work, did a lot of work in Northern Ireland and Ireland between the Protestant community and the Catholic community. Did a lot of work, 10 years of work in South Africa, the Black, the colored, and the white communities there. And then more recently, Israel and Palestine. But one of the things that I think syncs with the travel tourist industry is the work that we do is like everyone has a right to tell their story, and everyone has a right to tell the story in their own way and in their own time. And it doesn't have to be an argument. Israel, Palestine, or the Protestants and Catholics in Northern Ireland, it's an argument, and it's an argument that escalates into violence. I mean, there were riots in Belfast and Derry on Friday night, as I heard in the news, and thinking, oh my God, I hope we're not going back, and we're not, I'm sure. But I mean, giving people the right to tell their own story in their own way is really a critical role that I think museums play, and the work that we all share in it. It really is not just, travel is not just about travel. I think, as Susan said, travel is not just about travel. Travel is about building a community of understanding and tolerance.
We need people together. We need people together.
So anything else before I want to just say that again, Susan's asked the question, but maybe Bashara and Mo can say, like, how do we, what's exciting coming up for the museum? How is the museum coping with COVID shutdown? Is it reopening? And what exhibits can we look forward to? And if people came to what do they do? And if they can sign up for the virtual tour, what do they do? Give us a little bit more to go on as we leave.
Maybe I will share a little bit, and Mo can share some from his point of view on virtual tours. So first of all, we are reopening the museum on May 1st. There is a lot of restrictions that has been lifted in Washington, D.C. as many people are getting vaccinated. So we are opening on May 1st on Saturdays from 12 to 6. And it will be, we are opening with an exhibit on calligraphy. We have an exhibit that introduces Americans to Palestinian cities and Palestinians to Palestinian cities in Palestine and Israel. And it's from an artist he's Palestinian artist who's based in Virginia. And so that's the exhibit that we're going to be open on May 1st. Of course, we will be hosting tours, every tour every hour from 12 to 6 more. And his team of docents will be hosting these tours every Saturday.
Wonderful. And over to you, Mo. What else would you like to add to that?
So, I mean, beyond the tours, I think Shada pretty much covered the lion's share of it. But, we do have books at the museum if you want to learn more about Palestinian culture. And I was going to recommend some resources if you want to learn a little bit more, like of recent Palestinian issues or Palestinian art. There's a movie out on Netflix called The Hadiyah, or The Gift. The Present. Sorry.
The Present. Yeah.
The Present. Yeah. And it's a contender for the Oscar for Best Short Foreign Film. And there's also, a recent book, if you want to learn more. We're actually going to have a talk with the author of this book. This is Hala, it probably looks backwards, Hala Alian, and it's called The Arsonist City. And it's a really wonderful novel on the catalogs the saga of a Palestinian refugee family from Lebanon. So,
we also host virtual tours with Mo. And we are going to continue doing that. If you want to know more about us, please go on our website. It's mpp-dc.org, mpp-dc.org. You can sign up for our email list. We send a lot of virtual things that we're doing and events, as Mo said, the book, and we have cooking class coming up next week. And also the important thing I kept want to mention from the beginning is that we, as tourists, as tour guides, we would like to invite you to organize events and bring your tours to the museum. And perhaps, I don't know what's your COVID-19 procedures right now, but we would love to have you maybe for a reception later on. Maybe in the fall we can have a small reception and invite you all to see the museum yourself.
For Marikah's survivors, everyone, Marikah's met Bashara, and so it would be wonderful if the local tour guides, I'm sure the museum would, as you say, the invitation is there at some date to host all the tour guides who want to come, and we'll serve up some great Middle Eastern food and show you the museum exclusively, so that it's there as one of the little attractions that your visitors to Washington D.C. can access.
Contact us, please. Contact the Guild of Professional Tour Guides or me personally, so that we can make an arrangement. What is the capacity of the museum?
So So before COVID, we have capacity of 30 people. So we have 30 people capacity. That's the usual capacity of the museum. But with COVID, we usually have from 5 to 10 people.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Great. Any other final comments before? I mean, this has been I know we haven't, with a small group of people, but very invested. And I just think in 2011, I was on the second year of running this New Story leadership program, and we were interviewing in Bethlehem, and I got to meet this young man called Bashara, and I wanted to I'd been to Bethlehem once before, I think, but he took some time out, and he said, I'll show you myself. I'll show you my Bethlehem. And it's like he was a tour guide. Bashar was a graduate of Bethlehem University. But I still vividly remember that, there was no substitute for, this is my Bethlehem. And so the passion and the love and the, every stone said something to him that I wouldn't have had a clue what it meant. So, I mean, I guess years now, 10 years later, who would have known that maybe, Bashara is doing exactly the same thing, but it's in the space of a global city like Washington and offering that to the world. And then on the same trip, I went to Daheisha refugee camp, which is the big camp just outside of Bethlehem, and met this young artist called Ahmed Hamidat. And Ahmed lives in a sort of cinder block house in the Daheisha camp. And he showed me his art studio. Well, his art studio was like the back garage, just concrete. But the art that he had there was just unbelievably beautiful. And so, I mean, years later, we got Ahmed to come out to Washington, and he worked on the Hill with one of the congressmen, and wanted to sponsor his art. So when the museum opened, first of all, it was a roving museum. The first artist in residence for the Museum of the Palestinian People was Ahmed Hamidat. And so I always kind of think, the paintings that I saw in a little garage in a refugee camp outside of Bethlehem, the Daheisha camp, get now their chance. And now his exhibits are in the Palestinian Museum, not only in the museum in Washington, but they're in the museum in Be'ezait University, where he's teaching now at Al-Quds. He's teaching art. I mean, it's just like, there's so much talent that I think goes to waste in a conflict zone, whether it's Ireland or South Africa or Israel or Palestine. I don't know, it's a quote from a movie, isn't it? A life is a horrible thing to waste. A life is a horrible thing to waste. And in a refugee life and everything else, we've got to, this is so important. There's so much treasure there that can ennoble the human spirit. And I think the Palestinian story is just one of those stories, emblematic of the story of gay people and civil rights stories and transgender people. There's migration stories. There's stories need to ennoble us and uplift us. And I do think the Palestinian story does that. So I want to thank Mo. You have the final word, but I want to thank you for the work you did to put this together. It's been wonderful. It's your story and you tell it. But I think I want to invite you, just as you leave, you have a final story for us, maybe, about the rabbi. I know that you told it, it's a very personal story to you, but maybe if you're up to it, just to sort of wrap up and maybe finish with that story, because I think it really touches us, touches our hearts about what the museum is about.
Thank you so much, Paul. You've been a great guide through this presentation. I really appreciate it. It's not so much a story. I mean, like I mentioned before, we welcome people of all backgrounds and faiths. We definitely welcome Jews and Israelis. And we had actually a synagogue group from Bethesda, Maryland, which is the city right outside DC. And they came to visit us on a private tour. And we had an exhibit called Reimagining the Future, which is probably the exhibit that you mentioned, Paul, which featured art by Palestinian artists that kind of seek to capture a bright future. What would Palestinians imagine as a bright future? And they captured this on canvas. And as the people were watching, the head of the group, he was the rabbi of the congregation. Like, the name escapes me now, but he whispered in my ear. He's like, I want to show you something. And he took me to a painting which had basically a caption that said, this artist seeks to capture the an optimistic future, a bright future of Palestine. He's like, this is why we can't have peace. It's because your goals are so lofty, your aspirations are so unrealistic. And I said nothing at the time, but I waited till the movie was over, and I came up to him and I'm like, Zionism and Israel was a dream. It was a miracle. Why can't we dream too? And I think the museum is a realization of this. It is a dream realized for us. And I really hope it continues to chart that path. So thank you again so much.
Thank you, Mo. Yeah, I mean, the dream has to be imagined before it can be built, and the museum is doing that. So back to you, Marika, and back to you, Jürgen, and thanks again for your attention, everybody. And I hope this video will go online and it'll be available for others to see, like the wonderful work that Jürgen is doing. So there may be other people who'll catch this story later when they watch the replay. But back to you, Marika, and back to you, Jürgen.
Yeah, let me just take the lead here, and I give Marika the last word. If that's okay. And I wanted to thank everyone for being part of our small group today. We on live, we had 29,000 people so far watching us, so we're a lot larger group in the background.
Wow.
And it has been a very interesting story for many of us, I think. And I also hope that Mo and at the Palestinian Museum will be joining our group, the World Tourism Network. We'd be happy to welcome you on a complimentary basis if you wanted to join us. We have one member actually in Palestine. It's the owner, Elena Khoury, from the, I probably pronounce it wrong, Taibi Golden Hotel in Ramallah. And it'll be important, I think, to have tourism establishments like this museum to be part of our international group in 127 countries. Anyone else who wants to join us, we encourage you to do this because we're growing our community. Simply go to WTN.travel, WTN.travel. And at the same time, if you're a member, you can also be part of an interest group. And we have the tour guide interest group, where Marika is leading this group, where these type of discussions are expanding, and we're going to have a lot more events. So I encourage everyone to join us. Also, I wanted to remind you there is a lot more coming up this month. Tomorrow, we have a very important event, at least for Gisao and for myself, because we're going to be going and talking to the Hawaii Tourism Authority here in Honolulu about the tourism situation here in Hawaii. And I can tell you, I went to Waikiki last weekend and it was booming. I didn't see any difference from what it was like a year or two ago, 2 years ago. Good. So we want to see how this all works. It's all domestic tourism, but domestic tourism is stronger than domestic tourism was in the good times. So that's going to be an interesting story, and especially to see what are the corona numbers. They're still low, and almost everyone is getting vaccinated. I have my second shot tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to this. Also on Friday, we have an event with Dr. Eleanor Garley, our reporter in New York, and she's going to have a glass of sherry. And we'll be interviewing Cesar Saldana. And you should, if you like sherry, if you like a glass of wine, join us. It's part of our Wine Store Travel group. On April 10th, and Marika will tell you a little bit more about it, we're going to watch the cherry blossom in Washington, D.C. It's part of this tour guide group. And then on the 20th of April, we're going to welcome Visit Britain. And we're going to learn about the situation, what is fast changing between now and April 20th, to see how Visit Britain is planning for the future, or how it's operating on April 20th. So join us this. And then finally this month, we're going to Puerto Rico. We're going to talk about agriculture tourism. And that's also an initiative by Dr. Eleanor Garley from New York. So from my end, I wanted to thank everyone for attending. Go to worldtourismnetwork.com to join us. And you can see a copy of this event will be playing probably starting in a few hours back to back on every page on eTurboNews, on Livestream. And then, of course, we archive it like we do all our events on livestream.travel or on worldexpo.travel. And you can listen to it as many times as you like. And finally, I also wanted to say a special thank you to Dr. Taleb Rifa and Mona Nafa, who've been joining us from Jordan. And it's very important that you were, I think, part of this group. And of course, also Yoni from Jerusalem. So that helped out a lot. And finally, I wanted to recognize what I should have done in the beginning, Professor, and I call her Professor Snow White. She's joining us from Serbia, and she leads our educational group. And we're going to hear a lot more from Snow White in the future. We're planning a number of events. And Mona asked me about some exciting opportunity possibly in Jordan, so we can talk about this privately at another time. Anyways, I wanted to give the very last word to Marikar in Washington before we say good evening, good night, aloha from this part of the world.
Okay, thanks again, Jürgen, Paul, and his team. It was a very, very interesting, inspiring, educational conversation today. And we keep up the good work as we move along the year, as we move into maybe a post-COVID world, hopefully, with all the vaccinations we're receiving. And hopefully our stories will get stronger and deeper and really more, really inspiring the world. And I'd like to invite you to come to our world of writing and showing you the gift that keeps on giving, the origin, the roots, the tradition, and celebration of what we call the cherry blossoms. And here to give our team, David, could you give a few words of what we're going to be doing on Saturday? David is part of my team for this broadcast.
Thank you, Marikar. I did enjoy this presentation very much, and it's so important that we see each other as people rather than just the stereotypes that sometimes we tend to do. I really enjoyed this very much. But we're not only going to talk about, like Marikar said, the roots and the origins and the history of the cherry blossoms, but how that transcends into something bigger, into something more almost spiritual, the deeper meaning of the cherry blossoms to us. And that's a large part of our presentation, and I hope you can come and watch it.
Japanese connection as well. Japanese connection.
Yes, we will give you the Japanese connection, the roots, where it began, where it came from. Wonderful. That's why it's the gift that keeps on giving. Gifts of friendship, of peace, of romance, all of that. So come join us, share your story too. We want everybody to get involved. That's the beauty of this broadcast. We are one world and it's getting smaller because of this.
Right. I don't know, but listen, thank you, Mo. Thank you, Bashara. Thank you, Yoni and Mona and Taleb for being part of this. You made it extra, extra special. And thank you, Jürgen, for giving us this platform. You're doing amazing work, and I congratulate you and want to support you in any way we can. I've got to go to another meeting, but thanks, everybody. All the best.
Thank you. One last thing I forgot to mention, you just go to worldtourismevents.com. That's where you find all the events and you can register. So do this now. Register for upcoming events, worldtourismevents.com. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay. Aloha.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Salamat.
Thank you. Thank you, Mo.